Okay. As you're all finishing this journey of yours to a small town called Faerun to deliver this wagon of supplies, you're coming along the last portion of the Tribord Trail. And just as you come to a bend and you're steering your cart around the curve, you look ahead of you and you see what looks to be two dead horses directly in the middle of the pass up ahead of you. What is it you'd like to do? Hey everyone, welcome back to more D&D. My name's Brandon Moore, and as I mentioned before, I'm a forever DM, and I've dedicated way too much time and effort into creating this immersive dungeon atmosphere in the basement here for my players and myself. So if you're like me and you like to watch what others do to kind of gain inspiration and ideas for something that you might like to add to your space, stick around because today we're going through everything. Alright, so if you're anything like me, then you probably agree that the most important thing in a game room is the playing surface, or in this case, the game table. So the first thing I did when we moved into this house and I was given the okay to make this my dungeon was I built this beast. Okay. So if you're interested in the exact dimensions and specs of this table, stick around to my next video because I'm actually going to be covering everything involved in this exact table, including dimensions, materials, reasons I did certain things. So if you're interested in that, stick around. But as far as general features go, I knew there were a few key things that I wanted to add that might be something that you want to make sure you add too. The first thing was I wanted to make sure I had enough room for at least 8 people around the table. And that was for 2 reasons. The first is that most of my campaigns tend to have 6 people in them. So I wanted to be able to make sure I could sit the 6 people with me on my own side as well. I also host regular board game nights, and so I actually break everything down here, and I wanted to be able to make sure that when I do that, there's plenty of room to sit 8 people comfortably all the way around with equal reaching space. Another thing I wanted to make sure I added was this little shelving space here. I know that a lot of people tend to have materials with them, from papers to notes and folders and other things that really do clutter up the tabletop, so I wanted to give them a space here to be able to tuck that away and have out just the important stuff on the top. I additionally wanted to make sure that there was a place for people that use electronic devices for their notes and stuff to be able to plug into and charge those, so we're not waiting around in the middle of a campaign when someone needs to plug in their iPad. And so I added an outlet in the back of every shelf at every seat. The last thing I made sure I added into the design is actually underneath this TV case here. You see, before I had this TV case for all the maps, we used to use paper ones. And I wanted to protect them in case there were any spills or anything. So you may be able to see a little bit of a reflection or a shine here. This is 1/8" plexiglass, and it can be lifted and maps slid underneath, so that way when the plexiglass go back down, it's the same height as this. But it protects the maps and you're able to draw on them as well. Because at the time we would draw whether or not there were fire spells or different things that I wanted to add to the maps, and then at the end we could just wipe them away and add a new map. Then of course there's some other fun features that were added, such as these dice trays here. I did not used to have these, but I found that most people piled up their dice inside the tray. So I designed this thing here to be able to store your dice up top and roll them down into the tray. I also changed the design last minute from being a solid wood tabletop to this whiteboard material, solely for the fact that I know everyone has those moments where you get something that you want to make sure you write in your notebook, but you want to put it in the right spot, but everything's going so fast and you want to try and find that spot. Instead of waiting around, you can just pick up the dry erase marker that I have at every seat, you can write it down in front of you, and then when the session's over, you can come back and find exactly where you want to put those notes in if need be. Okay, if you were to ask me, Brandon, what tool in your arsenal increased the efficiency in your games more than anything else? That would be this TV case right here. Having digital maps that you can change out on the fly, move around, and add elements to without having to worry about physically changing out the papers or lifting up the plexiglass or drawing things or trying to reveal the fog of war without your players seeing things they're not supposed to. It really has sped the game up and prevented it from getting bogged down. Now, as far as the case goes, I did build it myself. I made the outside out of black walnut, and I did buy this TV new from Best Buy. It's a Pioneer 50-inch TV. I can link it below if you'd like to, but I would actually recommend looking at maybe Craigslist or Letgo for a used TV. And instead of spending $100 or $200 on a new one, just spend the 50 bucks on one that maybe if it gets broken, it's not gonna hurt as bad.
And they ask you how you are, and you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine.
And then as far as finishing it up, you just hook it into the case, run the wires out to whatever it is you're using to run your game. In my case, it is the laptop that I have behind the DM screen. The wires come out from this side, they go down into the table, and then I plug them right into the laptop. All right, so I heard a line once that hell hath no fury like a DM scorned. And one of the scariest things a player can hear is, go ahead and roll for initiative. Well, I get to add a little bit more fear to that when I get up and I walk over here to this cabinet. And the higher up I go, the scarier it's gonna get. Okay, I keep all of my miniatures here in this cabinet. On the bottom, I also keep books and the players' notebooks and folders. The first drawer I have dedicated for the players' dice and other materials they want to keep here, like dice trays. The second one up is for DM tools, like my recorder when I'm not using it. I have some monster stat blocks on paper here in case I'm not using the digital setup. And then I have like pens and markers and so on. The rest of the drawers are all for the miniatures, and they are just scaled by size, starting at tiny and small, where you can expect to find sturges and goblins and so on. Then in the mediums, you can expect to find your orcs and your zombies. Then up at the top, you have the largest from gargantuan down to huge, and I like to keep those out in the open just as a constant reminder to the players that, you know, what they do affects what I might throw at them. And then I do have one drawer specifically designated for PCs and NPCs. Any miniatures that people bring in, they can leave here if they want, and then anything I print, such as the NPC characters, will go in there as well. So I do 3D print all of my own miniatures. It's a good way to save a lot of money, especially if you plan on printing as many as I do. Don't get me wrong, the ones that you can buy are very nice, especially when they come painted. But if that's not something you're totally worried about, or if you want to paint them yourself, then I highly recommend getting into 3D printing your own. If that's something that interests you, I'm going to be making a video all about 3D printing miniatures with an FDM printer, which is the cheaper option when it comes to the two different types being filament or resin. So if you're looking to learn all about this, I'm going to be putting something together, so look forward to that in the future. Okay, as we're working our way around, you finally get a good look at what exactly is behind my DM screen, and I'm sure one of the first things that pops out is the fact that I have two laptops. This laptop is used to control the TV that's in the center of the table, along with the sounds and the noises that I play out of the speakers up in the ceiling, which I'll give you a good look at here shortly. This laptop is used to control the two monitors right in front of it, and I also use this one for any notes that I'm taking, or if I need to Google something real quick. That's what this one's for. The monitor that's inside of my DM screen, I specifically use that one with Improved Initiative to track the battle. If you don't use Improved Initiative yet, I highly, highly recommend it. I'm not paid by any means to say that. It's just a very, very helpful app, and it's really good at what it does. This monitor I use to show pictures that I think the party might find interesting, or something that may give them a sense of what exactly it is they're getting into. And all I use for that is PowerPoint. I just make a slideshow in a PowerPoint and I present it on this screen. Then I can click through or select which slide I want to show specifically, so I'm not giving anything away and I'm showing them exactly what I want them to see. Additionally, behind the screen, you can see I have a space just like everybody else does, and inside of here I keep a lot of the things I use most frequently. One example I have is this box here that I modeled, and inside of it just contains a bunch of colorful rings, 10 of them to be specific. And I use these to track individuals within a group of monsters. So for example, if they're fighting 8 orcs, I mark each orc with its own color. That way the players can tell me which one they want to hit, and I can actually mark the colors in Improved Initiative, so I can track the corresponding health to that individual monster. This is something that I modeled. I plan on putting the STL for this right on a Patreon that I'm putting together. If that interests you at all, feel free to click the link below. I'm going to link it to my Patreon once I put that together. I also keep markers back here, both dry erase and wet erase. That's just a preference for whoever. And one other thing I keep back here is this little push-pull stick, because the table is just long enough at this point that I can't reach much of the stuff on the far side, so I use this to move the minis around. Over here you can see I have my dice tray. It holds 12 sets of dice, which is way more than I ever need, but it's fun to color coordinate the different settings that I have going on for each campaign session. And then underneath of that you can see I keep books such as the Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, whatever module it is we're working on, and then I have a binder for each campaign that I'll keep under there as well. But that's the basics for what I have behind here. A lot of it is on these two laptops specifically, but I also keep this space open in case I have quick notes that I want to write with a marker, or if I have a book that I need open, I've got the space for that here. Okay, so we're just gonna ignore the unfinished section of the ceiling here. It matches the rest of the unfinished basement, but this is one of the few times I'm gonna emphasize the ceiling because I wanna talk about what's above my table. Starting with the obvious, I have the custom chandelier here that I built to have a little bit more of a Nordic Viking vibe to it, but I made it out of very basic materials you can get right from Home Depot, including 4x4s, lighting right out of the lighting section, rope, and stain. If you want to make something similar, please feel free to reach out with any questions you might have. I'm not going to make a video on this because I didn't record anything during the process of building it, but I definitely don't mind helping out. Additionally, you can see I have 4 10-inch overhead speakers. These do a great job of really immersing the players in the ambience that I'm trying to put forth. I can put a link in the description below to the exact speakers that I got, along with the receiver that I got to go with them because they work seamlessly together. And then I have 4 recessed lights. We tend not to use them too often because they're more of the brighter, cold, white light. But if we're playing something other than Dungeons & Dragons that requires maybe more visuals or has a lot more instructions that need to be read, we'll turn them on to make it easier to do so. Alright, so obviously we're going to talk about some of the aesthetic that I have down here in the dungeon as well, starting with the swords that are hanging up behind me. This is called Blacksword. It's clearly my favorite. It's the only one in the case, and that's because it's the only one I ever bought, and it is the only one that is actually mine. I bought this from a website called Cult of Athena. If you're looking to get one of your own or get into the hobby, highly recommend checking out that website. They have a great selection, and they're very trustworthy. It's what I was told to do, and so now I'm passing that on to you. Behind me, you can see Sting from The Hobbit as well. This one is not mine. It was gifted to me by a buddy of mine just to hang up down here. He also gave me Glamdring. I just haven't had a chance to hang it yet, so once I get to do that, I'll have all 3 of them up here, and it's gonna look great. I also have this replica Spartan shield from the movie 300. Somebody off of Etsy handcrafted this out of steel, and it is beautiful, especially how it reflects that chandelier light back out. I did have to build a bracket behind that just consisted of a couple dowels on a piece of walnut and a hook up in the corner to make it easy to put back on and take off. Just like that. And then of course on this side we have this massive map of Faerun. This map was a community project and the file is downloadable for free right on D&D Beyond's website. They have low, medium, and high resolution that you can use depending on whatever size print you're getting if you're doing that. I forget who I sent this out to, but they were able to print it on this canvas with the pockets on the top and bottom. So I was able to get that in, buy the wooden dowels, put them in and hang it up. And now this thing is used so many times during the campaign, especially when they find a new location, then they want to know where it's at in reference to where they are, if they want to know what direction they're going. So this is a great reference for actual use in-game, and I highly recommend getting one if you can. Alright, I hope you guys enjoyed this look into my D&D setup in the dungeon down here and a brief look behind the screen and how I run my campaigns. Keep an eye out in the near future for that content regarding my table build. I'm hoping to get it out shortly, and I have plenty of other content lined up as well. If you have any comments or suggestions or questions, please leave them down below or shoot me a message. I'm always open to new ideas. Thank you so much for being around, and I look forward to the next video with you guys.